The news spread across human space like fire through dry grass within hours of Ambassador Vasquez's return. Every news channel on every world was talking about the Interstellar Council and their Treaty of Ascension. People gathered in homes and bars and public squares, watching the footage of the alien ship and listening to experts argue about what it all meant. The United Terran Federation called an emergency session of the General Assembly. Representatives from Earth and all 12 colony worlds gathered in the Great Hall in Geneva, a building that had seen the birth of nations and the end of wars. Now it would decide the fate of the entire human race. Ambassador Vasquez stood before them and explained everything. She showed them the treaty, word by word. She described the Archon and the other species, their power and their certainty. She told them about the 30-day deadline and the unspoken threat behind the Archon's words. When she finished, the hall erupted into chaos. Representative Morrison of the North American Union was the first to speak. He was a large man with a loud voice, and he used both to demand attention. "This is simple," he said. "We cannot win a war against these aliens. Their technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. Their fleets could crush us in days. We must accept the treaty and survive. Pride is not worth extinction." The representatives from the outer colonies shouted him down. They had not traveled across the stars to bow to alien masters. They had not built new worlds with their own hands just to hand them over to creatures who saw them as children. Representative Chun from Tau Ceti stood up. She was small and fierce, with eyes that burned with anger. "My grandparents fled Earth because they wanted freedom," she said. "They spent 20 years in a metal box floating through nothing, just so their children could live without chains. And now you want us to put those chains back on? To kneel before insects and monsters? Never. I would rather die standing than live on my knees." The debate raged for hours. Some argued for acceptance, pointing to the overwhelming power of the Council. Others demanded resistance, calling on humanity's long history of fighting against impossible odds. A few suggested compromise, hoping to negotiate better terms. But it was Captain Marcus Chen who changed everything. He was not a politician. He was a military man, the commander of the warship TFS Defiance. He had spent his career studying potential threats to human space, and when the alien ship appeared, he had immediately begun gathering intelligence. Now he stood before the assembly with information that none of them had considered. "I have spent the last 2 weeks analyzing every piece of data we could gather about the Council," he said. His voice was calm and steady, the voice of a man who had faced death many times and learned not to fear it. "I have studied their communications, their history, their culture, and I have found something that should concern us all." He pressed a button and images appeared on the screens around the hall. Pictures of alien cities, beautiful and advanced, but somehow empty. Statistics showing population numbers that had not changed in centuries. Records of scientific discoveries that had slowed to a trickle thousands of years ago. "The Council does not conquer through war," Captain Chun explained. "They conquer through comfort. Every species that signs the treaty receives protection and technology and trade. They no longer need to struggle. They no longer need to fight for survival. And slowly, over centuries, they stop growing. They stop dreaming. They stop being anything except what the Council allows them to be." He showed them more data. Species that had once built great empires, now reduced to a handful of worlds. Cultures that had once produced great art and science, now producing nothing but the tribute demanded by their masters. Populations that had once numbered in the trillions, now barely holding steady. "The Council does not want to destroy us," Captain Chun said. "They want to tame us. They want to take everything that makes us human and sand it down until we are smooth and safe and manageable. And in 1,000 years, our descendants will look back and wonder what happened to the fire that drove their ancestors to the stars. The hall fell silent. The representatives looked at the images on the screens, seeing for the first time what submission truly meant. Not death, but something worse. A slow fade into nothing, a loss of everything that mattered. Wrapped in the soft blanket of safety, it was then that Dr. Amara Okonkwo asked to speak. She was 94 years old, a historian who had spent her life studying the human journey from caves to stars. She walked slowly to the podium, her body bent with age, but her mind still sharp as a blade. When she spoke, her voice was soft, and everyone leaned forward to hear. "I have studied our species for 70 years, she said. "I have read about every war we have fought, every disaster we have survived, every challenge we have overcome. And I have learned one thing above all else. Humans are not built for submission." She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of representatives from a dozen worlds. "We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden boats, not knowing what lay on the other side. We are the species that climbed mountains simply because they were there. We are the species that looked at the moon and said, 'We will walk on that,' and then we did. We are the species that refused to accept limits, refused to stay in our place, refused to believe that anything was impossible." A voice grew stronger as she spoke, drawing power from somewhere deep inside. "The Council has existed for 40,000 years. They have brought hundreds of species into their fold, and not one of those species has ever refused. Do you understand what that means? It means that in all the galaxy, in all of history, no one has ever said no to them." She smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. "I think it is time someone did." The vote was held the next morning. Representatives cast their decisions in silence, each one carrying the weight of billions of lives. The count was close, closer than anyone had expected. But when the final tally was announced, the result was clear. Humanity would not sign the Treaty of Ascension. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would walk its own path among the stars, whatever the cost. Ambassador Vasquez received her instructions and prepared to return to the alien ship. She did not know what would happen next. None of them did. But as she boarded the shuttle that would carry her to the Council vessel, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Pride. The human race had made its choice. Now they would face whatever came next, together. The ship appeared without warning on a cold Tuesday morning in March 2347. Captain James Wong was drinking his third cup of coffee aboard the monitoring station Sentinel-7 when his screen lit up with alerts. Something massive had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Something that was not human. For 300 years, humanity had searched the stars for signs of intelligent life. They had sent probes and signals and messages of peace into the endless dark. They had found bacteria on Mars, strange fish in the oceans of Europa, and forests of crystal on a moon orbiting a distant gas giant. But they had never found anyone who could answer back. Until now. The ship was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. It seemed to be made of living light, shifting colors that human eyes could not quite understand. It was also enormous. The thing was larger than most cities, and it moved through space with the easy grace of a creature swimming through water. Within hours, every government on Earth and across the 12 colony worlds knew about the visitor. Within days, the ship had traveled to Earth orbit, and its inhabitants had made contact. They called themselves the Interstellar Council, and they had been waiting for humanity for a very long time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was chosen to represent the human race. She was 63 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen wars end and treaties signed. She had spent her life bringing people together, finding common ground between enemies. Now she would try to do the same with beings from another star. She boarded the alien vessel alone, as they had requested. The interior was vast and strange, filled with soft light and air that smelled like flowers after rain. Creatures of every shape and size walked the corridors. Some had too many legs. Some had no legs at all. Some looked almost human, and those were somehow the most unsettling of all. They led her to a great chamber at the heart of the ship. 12 platforms rose from the floor in a circle, each holding a representative of a different species. At the center stood a creature that looked like a giant insect, with a body covered in plates of dark armor and eyes that glowed with ancient intelligence. This was Arkansas, the voice of the Interstellar Council. "Welcome, Ambassador," the Archon said. Its voice came from a device around its neck, translating its clicks and hisses into perfect English. "We have watched your species with great interest. You have done well to reach the stars so quickly. Most species take much longer." Elena bowed her head in respect. "Thank you, Archon. Humanity is honored by your visit. We have many questions." "And we have answers," the Archon replied. "But first, there are matters of law to discuss." The Archon gestured with one of its many limbs, and a document appeared in the air before Elena. It was written in 100 languages, including English. The title read, "The Treaty of Ascension." This treaty has governed the relationships between all spacefaring peoples for 40,000 years. The Archon explained. Every species that has risen to travel between stars has signed it. There are no exceptions. It is simply the way of things. Elena read the document carefully. Her face remained calm, but inside, her heart grew cold. The treaty required humanity to surrender all military vessels to Council control. It required them to limit their population growth to rates approved by the Council. It required them to colonize only worlds that the Council permitted. It required them to pay tribute in resources and labor every year. Forever. In exchange, humanity would receive protection from external threats. They would be allowed to trade with other Council species. And they would be given a seat at the Council table, the lowest seat, the seat of a servant. "Archon," Elena said slowly, "this treaty would make humanity subjects of the Council. We would not be partners. We would be property." The Archon made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You misunderstand, Ambassador. The Council does not own its members. It protects them. It guides them. Without the Council, young species like yours destroy themselves. You fight wars over resources. You poison your own worlds. You build weapons that could end all life. The Council prevents these tragedies by taking away our freedom to make our own choices," Elena said. "Freedom is a luxury that comes with maturity," the Archon replied. "Your species is still young, still dangerous. In time, as you prove yourselves, your restrictions will be eased. Many species have risen through the ranks over the centuries. Some now sit on the high platforms." It gestured to the other representatives. "They were all once where you are now. They all accepted the treaty. They all prospered." Elena looked at the other species. They sat silent and still, watching her with eyes and sensors and organs she could not identify. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply waited for her to do what every species before her had done. "What happens if we refuse?" she asked. The chamber went silent. The Archon's glowing eyes flickered with something that might have been confusion. The translator device around its neck made a strange sound, as if it was struggling to process her words. "Refuse?" The Archon repeated. "No species has ever refused. The concept is unusual. Why would anyone refuse protection? Safety? A place among the stars? We would not be among the stars," Elena said. "We would be beneath them, looking up at masters instead of equals. The Archon studied her for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was gentle, almost kind. Ambassador, I understand that this is difficult. Your species values independence. Many young species do. But you must understand the reality of your situation. The Council has existed for 40,000 years. Our combined fleets number in the hundreds of thousands. Our technology is beyond anything your people have imagined. If you refuse the treaty, you will not be allowed to expand. You will not be allowed to grow. And if you resist, the Archon did not finish the sentence. It did not need to. Elena stood in silence, feeling the weight of every human life pressing down on her shoulders. She thought of Earth, blue and green and beautiful. She thought of the colonies, full of families and dreams and children who had never known anything but hope. She thought of everything humanity had built, everything they had survived, everything they had become, and she thought of what they would lose if they bent their knee. I will need to consult with my government, she said finally. This decision is not mine to make alone. The Archon nodded slowly. Of course. We are patient. We have waited 40,000 years for new species to join us. We can wait a little longer. It paused. You have 30 standard cycles to submit your answer. Use the time wisely, Ambassador. The future of your species depends on it. Elena bowed once more, then turned and walked out of the chamber. The beautiful ship hummed around her, full of ancient power and older laws. Behind her, 12 species watched her go, already certain of the answer she would bring. They had never been wrong before. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of the alien ship for the second time. The beautiful lights still shifted around her, and the sweet air still filled her lungs. But everything felt different now. The first time, she had come seeking answers. This time, she carried an answer that no one in the council had ever heard before. 2 guards walked beside her, creatures that looked like a mix between birds and reptiles, with feathers of deep blue and eyes of gold. They did not speak to her. They simply guided her through the maze of hallways, toward the great chamber where the council waited. The chamber was exactly as she remembered it. 12 platforms rising from the floor, each holding a representative of a different species. Arkansas at the center, its armored body still and patient, its glowing eyes fixed on her as she entered. But something was different this time. There were others in the chamber now, standing in the shadows along the walls. Observers, she realized. Word had spread that the new species was returning with its answer, and many had come to watch. They expected to see history repeat itself, to see another young race bend its knee and join the great family of the council. They were about to be disappointed. Ambassador Vasquez, the Archon said, its translated voice filling the chamber. We are pleased to see you return. We trust that your leaders have had sufficient time to review our generous offer. Elena stopped at the center of the chamber, standing alone before the assembled might of a civilization that had ruled the stars for 40,000 years. She thought of Earth so far away now. She thought of her children and grandchildren who would live with the consequences of what she said next. She thought of all the humans across all the worlds, holding their breath, waiting. Archon Silas, she said, and her voice did not shake. I bring the answer of the human race. The chamber went silent. Every eye and sensor and organ turned toward her. The observers in the shadows leaned forward, eager to witness the moment of submission. We have read your treaty, Elena continued. We have studied its terms carefully. We understand what you offer and what you require in return. The Archon nodded slowly. And your decision? Elena took a deep breath. No. The word hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water. For a long moment, nothing happened. The council representatives sat frozen on their platforms, unable to process what they had heard. The observers in the shadows looked at each other in confusion. No? The Archon repeated. Its translator made a strange sound, as if the word did not quite fit. I do not understand. Please clarify your meaning. Humanity declines your offer, Elena said clearly. We will not sign the Treaty of Ascension. We will not surrender our ships or limit our growth or pay tribute to your council. We choose to remain independent. The confusion in the chamber slowly transformed into something else. The Kathrani representative, a tall creature with silver skin and no face, leaned forward on its platform. Is this a negotiation tactic? It asked through its own translator. Do you wish for better terms? This can be arranged within limits. No, Elena said. This is not a negotiation. This is our final answer. We do not wish to be members of your council under any terms. The monolith representative, a being of living crystal that glowed with inner light, made a sound like bells ringing. There must be a translation error, it said. No species refuses. It is not logical. The benefits of membership far outweigh the costs. Perhaps for your species, Elena replied. Not for ours. The chamber erupted into noise. A dozen different languages filled the air as the council representatives argued among themselves. The observers whispered and pointed. Even the guards beside Elena seemed unsettled, their golden eyes darting back and forth. Through it all, Arkansas remained still and silent, watching Elena with those ancient glowing eyes. Finally, the Archon raised one of its limbs, and the chamber fell silent. Ambassador, it said slowly, I have lived for over 3,000 years. I have welcomed hundreds of species into the council. I have seen empires rise and fall, stars born and die, the long march of history across the galaxy. And in all that time, I have never heard the word you have just spoken. It paused, as if searching for the right words. You do not understand what you are doing. Your species is young and proud and foolish. You see submission where you should see shelter. You see chains where you should see guidance. The universe is vast and dark, and full of dangers that your people cannot imagine. Without the Council's protection, you will be alone against those dangers. We have always been alone, Elena said. We climbed out of the caves alone. We crossed the oceans alone. We reached the stars alone. We are not afraid of being alone. The Archon made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. But there was no humor in it this time, only something old and sad. Very well, it said. If you will not join us willingly, then you must understand what happens next. The Council cannot allow an uncontrolled species to expand through the galaxy. You will be contained. Your colonies will be surrounded. Your growth will be stopped. And if you resist, the Archon's eyes glowed brighter. If you resist, you will be conquered. Not because we hate you, Ambassador. We do not hate anyone. But because it is the natural order of things. The strong guide the weak. The old teach the young. This is how civilization survives. Elena had expected this. She had prepared for it. But hearing the words spoken aloud, in that gentle and patient voice, still sent a chill down her spine. We understand, she said, and we will resist. You cannot win, the Archon said simply. Our fleets are vast. Our technology is superior. Your military strength is insignificant compared to ours. Perhaps, Elena agreed. But we will resist anyway, because that is what humans do. We do not ask whether we can win. We ask whether the fight is worth fighting. And for our freedom, for our children, for our future, yes, it is worth fighting. She looked around the chamber, at all the ancient and powerful beings, watching her with pity and confusion. You have conquered many species, she said. You have built an empire that spans the stars. But you have never faced a species like ours. We are not logical. We are not sensible. We do not surrender simply because the odds are against us. We fight until we cannot fight anymore, and then we fight some more. She turned back to the Archon. You are welcome to try to conquer us, she said. But I promise you this, it will cost you more than you can imagine. And in the end, you may find that some things cannot be conquered. Some fires cannot be put out. Some spirits cannot be broken. She bowed her head one final time. Goodbye, Archon. I hope someday we can meet again as equals. But until that day comes, humanity walks alone. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council sat in stunned silence, unable to understand what had just happened. Unable to comprehend that someone had finally, after 40,000 years, said the word they had never heard. No. The council fleet arrived at Proxima Centauri 6 months after the refusal. 3,000 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with power that humanity could not match. They were led by Admiral Vex of the Kisari, a species of aquatic warriors who had served the council as soldiers for 10,000 years. He had conquered 47 species in his career. He expected humanity to be number 40-8. The human colony at Proxima Centauri was home to 8 million people. They had been given the choice to evacuate, and most had taken it, fleeing to the outer systems on every ship available. But some had stayed behind. Soldiers, volunteers, and ordinary people who refused to abandon their homes without a fight. Admiral Vex sent the standard message: surrender now, and the population would be treated fairly. Resist, and there would be consequences. The humans did not respond with words. They responded with fire. The first wave of attacks came from everywhere at once. Asteroids that had drifted harmlessly through the system suddenly exploded, revealing weapons platforms hidden inside their rocky shells. Drones launched from a dozen different angles, piloted by volunteers who knew they would not survive. Small ships that had been playing dead suddenly came to life, ramming council cruisers at full speed while broadcasting messages of defiance. Admiral Vex lost 400 ships in the first hour. He was shocked, but not worried. The council fleet was still overwhelming, and humans were still just humans. He pressed forward, destroying the weapons platforms and shooting down the drones. His ships surrounded the planet and began landing troops. And then the real war began. The humans fought for every street, every building, every room. They used weapons that the council had never seen before, designed in secret during the 30 days of deliberation. Explosive devices hidden in walls. Chemical compounds that ate through alien armor. Traps that collapsed entire buildings onto advancing soldiers. But more than their weapons, the council feared their spirit. Human soldiers did not surrender when surrounded. They did not retreat when outnumbered. They fought until their ammunition ran out, and then they fought with knives and fists and teeth. They died with curses on their lips and fire in their eyes, taking as many enemies with them as they could. It took the council 3 months to secure Proxima Centauri. They had expected 3 days. The pattern repeated across human space. Tau Ceti fell after a year of brutal fighting. Epsilon Eridani held out for 18 months before the last defenders were overwhelmed. Every system, every world, every moon became a battlefield where humans showed the council what resistance truly meant. But the humans did not just fight. They also ran. While soldiers held the line against the council advance, millions of civilians fled into the darkness between stars. Generation ships launched from hidden shipyards, carrying families and supplies and everything needed to start again somewhere else. They traveled slowly, using old technology that did not require the routes the council controlled. They scattered in every direction, disappearing into the vast emptiness of space. The council could not stop them all. For every ship they caught, 10 more escaped. and each ship carried the seeds of humanity, ready to take root wherever they landed. 6 years into the war, the Council had conquered 8 human systems. They controlled the colonies, the cities, the infrastructure. But they did not control the people. Resistance cells operated on every occupied world. Bombs exploded in military installations. Council soldiers disappeared in the night, never to be found. Supplies were stolen, communications were disrupted, and collaborators were dealt with harshly. The humans who remained behind had not surrendered. They had simply changed how they fought. Admiral Vex, now old and tired from years of endless war, sent his reports to the Council with increasing frustration. His fleet had shrunk from 3,000 ships to less than 2,000. His soldiers were exhausted and demoralized. And despite everything he had done, the humans refused to accept defeat. He could not understand it. Every other species, when faced with overwhelming force, had eventually surrendered. They had calculated the odds, recognized the futility of resistance, and chosen survival over pride. But humans did not think that way. They did not calculate odds. They simply refused to stop. Back on the Council homeworld, Arkansas read the reports alone in its private chamber. The old insect had lived for over 3,000 years, and it had seen many wars. But it had never seen anything like this. One report caught its attention. It was a demographic study of the occupied territories, compiled by Council scientists who specialized in population management. The data showed something that should have been impossible. Human birth rates had not declined. On every other occupied world, in every other conquered species, birth rates dropped after submission. The people lost hope, lost purpose, lost the desire to bring new life into a world they no longer controlled. It was natural, expected. One of the reasons the Council's subject species slowly faded over the centuries. But the humans were different. Even under occupation, even while fighting a war they could not win, they were still having children. They were still building families. They were still planning for a future they might never see. The Archon stared at the report for a long time. It thought about the human ambassador and her fierce words. It thought about the soldiers who died rather than surrender. It thought about the generation ships, carrying hope into the endless dark dot, and for the first time in its 3,000 years of life, the Archon felt something it could not name. Something like respect. Something like fear. That night, the Archon called a meeting of the full Council. It presented the reports, the numbers, the projections for how long the war would continue. The other representatives listened in silence, their faces unreadable. When the Archon finished, it asked a simple question. How long are we willing to fight? The Khazari admiral wanted to continue until total victory. The Kathrani suggested deploying more extreme weapons. The monolith representative calculated the resource cost of another decade of war. But one voice spoke differently. It came from the Velith, an ancient species that had joined the Council before most of the others had even evolved. Their representative was a creature of light and shadow, barely visible in the chamber. We have conquered their worlds, the Velith said, but we have not conquered them. I do not think we can. Not truly. Not in any way that matters. The chamber erupted into argument, but the Archon raised a limb for silence. Explain, it said. The Velith flickered like a candle in wind. Some fires cannot be put out, it said, echoing the words of the human ambassador from years ago. Some spirits cannot be broken. We can kill their bodies, but we cannot kill what they are. And as long as even one human remains free, they will continue to fight. They will continue to inspire. They will continue to be human. The Archon sat in silence for a long moment, thinking of the endless war that stretched before them, thinking of the cost in ships and soldiers and time, thinking of what it meant that, for the first time in 40,000 years, the Council had met something it could not control. Then what do you suggest? It asked. The Velith flickered again. I do not know, it admitted. But I know this. The universe is no longer what it was. Something has changed. Something has awakened. And we must decide whether we will spend eternity trying to stamp it out, or whether we will learn to live with it. The council had no answer. And in the darkness between stars, the generation ships continued their long journey, carrying the human spirit to places where the council could not follow. The war ended not with a treaty or surrender, but with silence. One day, the council ships simply stopped advancing. They held their positions around the occupied worlds, but they made no more attacks. They sent no more soldiers to die in human streets. They waited watching as if they had finally run out of reasons to keep fighting. The official explanation, when it finally came, was practical. The war had become too expensive. Too many ships lost, too many soldiers dead, too much time spent chasing an enemy that refused to stay defeated. The council had other concerns, other threats, other responsibilities. Humanity was not worth the cost, but those who looked closely saw something else behind the decision. The council's other subject species had been watching the war with growing interest. They had seen humans fight against impossible odds. They had seen ordinary people choose death over submission. They had seen generation ships launch into the unknown rather than accept chains. And they had begun to ask questions that had not been asked in 40,000 years. If the humans could refuse, why couldn't they? The council could not afford to let those questions spread. So they stopped the war quietly and without fanfare, hoping that humanity would fade into the darkness and be forgotten. They were wrong. The human government had relocated to a frozen moon at the edge of known space, a place so cold and harsh that no council species would want it. President-in-exile Sarah Chun led what remained of organized human civilization, a few million people on scattered colonies, a handful of warships held together with hope and repair tape, and a determination that had not dimmed despite everything. When the council's final message arrived, she read it in her small office, surrounded by advisors who had aged decades in the years of war. The message was formal and cold. The council was withdrawing from human territory. There would be no more fighting, but there would also be no recognition, no trade, no communication. Humanity would be alone, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, left to survive or die on their own. The message ended with a single question from Arkansas. Why? President Chun thought about that question for a long time. She thought about her father, Captain Marcus Chun, who had died defending Tau Ceti when she was just a girl. She thought about her mother, who had lived long enough to see the evacuation of Earth, but not long enough to see where the journey would end. She thought about all the millions who had fought and died and sacrificed so that humanity could remain free. She wrote her response carefully, knowing that it might be the last communication between humans and the council for generations. You ask why we refused, she wrote. You ask why we chose war instead of peace, suffering instead of comfort, death instead of submission. You cannot understand our answer because you have forgotten what it means to struggle. Your council is 40,000 years old. You have brought hundreds of species under your protection. You have ended wars and prevented disasters and guided the growth of civilizations. And in doing so, you have forgotten the most important thing about life. It must be earned. We did not crawl out of caves because someone protected us. We did not cross oceans because someone guided us. We did not reach the stars because someone gave us permission. We did these things ourselves, with our own hands and our own minds and our own will. Every step was hard. Every achievement cost us blood and tears. And that is why they mattered. You offer us safety, but safety without struggle is a prison. You offer us guidance, but guidance without choice is slavery. You offer us protection, but protection that costs us our freedom is not worth having. We are human. We were born to struggle, to fight, to fail, and rise, and try again. That is not a weakness to be cured. It is the fire that drives us forward, the flame that keeps us alive. We do not hate you, Archon. We do not wish you harm. But we will never be what you want us to be. We will never stop reaching, never stop growing, never stop being who we are. You ask why we refused. The answer is simple. Because we are human. And humans do not kneel. She sent the message and turned to face her people. Ready to begin the long work of rebuilding. 400 years passed. Humanity scattered across 1,000 worlds, spreading through regions of space that the Council had never explored. Some colonies thrived, building new cities and new cultures. Others struggled, fighting against harsh environments and limited resources. A few failed entirely, their populations dying out or absorbed into other communities. But humanity survived. And more than survived, they grew. Without the Council's restrictions, they experimented and invented and pushed the boundaries of what was possible. They developed new technologies, new forms of government, new ways of living. They made mistakes and learned from them. They fought among themselves and then made peace. They did everything that living beings do when they are free to choose their own path. And they were not alone. Over the centuries, others found their way to human space. Refugees from Council worlds, individuals and groups who had heard the stories of the species that said no. They came seeking freedom, seeking a different way of life, seeking the chance to make their own choices. The humans welcomed them, sharing what they had and learning from what the newcomers brought. A new civilization began to take shape. One built not on hierarchy and control, but on cooperation and choice. It was messy and chaotic and often difficult. But it was alive in a way that the Council's perfect order had never been. And then, one day, a Council ship appeared at the edge of human space. It was not a warship. It was a small diplomatic vessel, carrying a delegation of young Council members who had been born long after the war. They had spent their lives studying the strange, stubborn species that had refused to kneel. And they had come to understand what their ancestors had not. President Marina Okonkwo, the great-great-granddaughter of the historian who had spoken so powerfully at the original debate, received them in the capital city of New Geneva. She was an old woman now, with white hair and kind eyes, but her voice was still strong. "Welcome to human space," she said. "We have been expecting you." The lead envoy, a young Kathrani who had never known the certainty of the old Council, bowed its silver head. "We come seeking understanding," it said. "Our ancestors made mistakes. We wish to learn from them." President Okonkwo smiled. "Then you have already learned the most important lesson," she said. "The willingness to admit mistakes is the beginning of wisdom." She led them through the city, showing them the monuments to those who had fought and died in the long walk, as the war had come to be called. She introduced them to humans and aliens living side by side, building families and businesses and futures together. She showed them the schools where children learn not just facts, but how to think, how to question, how to choose. "This is what we fought for," she said. "Not just survival, but this. The right to be what we are, to grow in our own way, to make our own path through the stars." The envoys stayed for many months, learning and observing and slowly understanding. When they finally returned to Council space, they carried with them something more valuable than any treaty or tribute: a new idea. The idea that there might be another way to build a civilization, one based not on control, but on trust. That it took many more generations for that idea to spread. Change came slowly to the Council, as it always does to old things. But it came. And eventually, the galaxy began to look different than it had before. The humans never forgot what they had learned in the long walk. They never forgot the price of freedom, or the value of struggle, or the importance of saying no when no needed to be said. And they passed those lessons down to their children and their children's children, until they became part of what it meant to be human. On the anniversary of the refusal, every year, people across human space would gather to remember. They would tell the old stories, sing the old songs, and renew their commitment to the values that had carried them through the darkness. And in the Great Hall in New Geneva, carved into the wall where everyone could see, were the words that Ambassador Elena Vasquez had spoken so many centuries ago. We do not ask whether we can win. We ask whether the fight is worth fighting. For humanity, it had been worth fighting. It always would be.